One of the things that we sometimes forget about the Bible is that it is a story. It's a long story. It's an important story. It's a true story. And it starts at the beginning and it ends at the end. How about that? It starts at the beginning and it ends at the end, but all the way through this incredible story runs this theme of God wanting us to know Him, to love Him, to enjoy Him, and to experience His love, His care, His peace, His comfort, His strength in our lives. That's the story. And it's a story of men and women, boys and girls, who by our own choices have oftentimes turned away from God. But God is always there when we turn around, always. Now, about a month ago, we looked at another very important story. I wonder if any of you can remember what that story was. Can anybody remember a month ago when we talked about another story? Yes, sir. Nice and loud, please. That's exactly right. Great memory. Great memory. Well done. If you couldn't hear him, we talked about this story where Jesus and his disciples were on a hillside, and he was talking with them, and he looked up and he saw literally thousands of people coming towards them. It was the end of the day, and so Jesus said to his disciples, hey, let's get some food to feed them. And his disciples were, what? There's no way we can feed all these people. And then one of his disciples found a little boy, not unlike you guys, who had 5 loaves of bread and 2 fish. And they said, what? This isn't going to be any good. This isn't going to help out. But Jesus said, oh, you wait. You wait and see what I can do. And he took those 5 loaves of bread, those 2 fish, and he multiplied them. How many of you are studying multiplication in class? Whoa, awfully young here. That's very impressive. Very good. I remember trying to learn all of my multiplication tables, and I had the hardest time doing that. Anybody have a hard time learning those? Yes, thank you, adults. I appreciate that. Yes, me too. But Jesus had no problem with multiplication. He multiplied that bread, he multiplied those fish, and he was able to feed over 5,000 people. And remember, there were leftovers. So, this is where we pick up our next story, because at the end of that story, the people who Jesus fed wanted to take him, and the word in the Bible that is used is, and force him to become their king. They wanted to force him to become their king. What they didn't understand was that Jesus already was a king, but he was a very different kind of king than the king that they wanted. So, Jesus recognized that this was happening, and as a result, he takes his followers, his disciples, down to the shore of the Sea of Galilee, and this is what happens. Starting in John chapter 6, verse 16. That evening, so right away, we know, that evening, the very evening of the time when he fed all of those people, that very evening, it says, Jesus' disciples went down to the shore to wait for him. So he sent them down to the shore. Now, what we don't know was exactly why. Because if I had been there, I would have thought, man, I want to stay around here where all these people are excited and love me and are praising me and are just so happy about me being there, but not Jesus. So we're not sure why he sent those people, his disciples, away in the boat, but maybe it was because he didn't want them to get the idea that those people had of trying to force him to become king at that point in time. So, that evening, Jesus' disciples went down to the shore to wait for him. And they waited. And they waited. And they waited some more. But as darkness fell, and Jesus still hadn't come back, they got into the boat and headed across the lake toward the town of Capernaum. Soon, a gale is a strong, powerful wind. Soon a gale swept down upon them, and the sea grew very rough. The sea grew very rough, and they were bouncing about in the boat that they were in. They were frightened. It says they had rowed about 3 or 4 miles when suddenly they looked up and they saw Jesus walking on the water. Jesus was walking on the water toward the boat. And it says they were terrified. They were so afraid. I wonder why they were afraid when they saw Jesus walking on the water. One of the other accounts in one of the other Gospels tells us that they were afraid because they thought he was a ghost. They thought Jesus was a ghost, and so it scared them. But Jesus, being Jesus, called out to them and he said, "Don't be afraid. It is I am here." Then they were eager to let him in the boat, and immediately they arrived at their destination. What do we learn in this incredible story about who Jesus is? We learn this. We learn that sometimes we have to wait for him to act. Sometimes we learn that he doesn't always do things on our time schedule. He doesn't always make himself real and evident and present to us when we think we need for him to. And so just like the disciples waited, sometimes we have to wait. And sometimes, like the disciples, we not only wait, we do what they did. And that was, they worked out their own plan and tried to take things into their own hands. They went ahead and got in the boat. They waited for Jesus. He didn't show up. They got in the boat and they started rowing. And then when the storm came up, Jesus came to them. We all have in our lives storms that we experience. Sometimes they are storms that have to do with our relationships in our families. Sometimes they have to do with friendships at school. Sometimes there's storms that come about because we might be struggling in school. I struggled so much in elementary school that it was really embarrassing, literally embarrassing. My mother was a 3rd grade teacher, and she taught school for many years before I was born. And back in those days, in 3rd grade, we had the process of learning to write in cursive. And I know we do that here, which I think is a wonderful thing because it isn't taught in so many places. But writing in cursive, well, I tried and I worked and I tried to get my cursive just right. And then back to school night happened. And my mom went to back to school night, just like your parents come up to school to see what you've worked on, what your work has been. And all around the classroom, our classroom, were the papers and the projects and the writing and all the work that the students had done, including me. When my mom came home from school that evening, the first thing she said to me was, "I was so embarrassed. You have the worst handwriting in your whole class." That just was tragic to me. So I worked and worked and worked and worked, and I developed really nice cursive. Don't ask me to do it now, but I did. So sometimes in our lives we have these kind of storms that happen, and what Jesus shows us here is that when our storms happen, don't be afraid because I am going to be there. Jesus is there. Jesus is with us, even when those storms happen. And what I love is at the end of this story, it says that they recognized finally who Jesus was as he was walking on the water, and they were, quote, eager to let him in the boat. They wanted him to get in that boat right away. And he did. And then it says, and immediately they arrived at their destination. Jesus shows up in our lives on time, on his perfect timing, not ours. And his promise is he is going to take us to our destination, wherever that might be in our lives. For me, when I was in third grade, that destination for me was learning how to write properly. I don't know what it might be for you. I also struggled in my family with issues with my family that Jesus showed up to help me get through. What might be the storm that you're facing? Second question, are you aware and are you looking for and recognizing Jesus' presence right there with you, whatever that storm might be? And are we trusting that this Jesus who loves us so much is faithful to take us through to where he wants us to be? Let's pray.